We have some new expert knowledge of the failed assassination attempt of Donald Trump. Lieutenant Tim McMillan on Twitter said, having personally worked several presidential and vice presidential security details, here's some of my thoughts based on the available info of the assassination attempt on Trump. It's a thread that reads, 1. The Secret Service employ a multi-tiered defense in-depth approach to protective missions. An inner tier offer close protection support, these being the agents you see rushing in and surrounding Trump after the initial shots go off. That is the innermost tier, the people that are close around Donald Trump. A second middle tier is tasked with identifying and defending against mid-range threats, example, the crowd. This tier is largely comprised of local and state law enforcement temporarily attached to the security detail. This is the area that I worked in on prior details, which makes a lot of sense. So if you've been trained, if you're a trained Secret Service agent, then you were in Donald Trump's closest tier. But if you're a trained law enforcement that works in the area, you're in this second tier because you don't have the specific training needed to protect the president at a close level. Finally, you have an extended tier, which covers long-distance threats. This can include counter-sniper rifles and cyber/SIGINT support and CBRN defense. 2. People have wondered, how could the counter-snipers in the videos not have seen the would-be assassin prior to him getting off a shot? This is because the area of responsibility for those counter-snipers on the roof behind Trump was very likely in the extend tier. Essentially, they were scanning for threats a great distance well beyond the roughly 150 meters the threat appeared. I've read anywhere from 150 to 300 meters. This is evidenced by the fact that the elevated counter-sniper has to dramatically drop his line of sight to respond to the shooter, and you can see that in the video. The sniper on the roof has to drop his line of sight, and he only has a few seconds to respond. We'll get into that. Secret Service advanced teams would have absolutely pre-scouted the location and identified the building the shooter used as a vulnerable spot in the defense, which begs the question, how was this guy still able to climb on the roof and get off a shot? Based on limited details at this point, in my opinion, the security breakdown occurred in the middle tier, the second tier, which would likely include law enforcement who were supposed to be assigned to the area near the outer buildings. How that significant of a breakdown could occur is up for speculation. However, like I said, this tier is largely dependent on local law enforcement and not the Secret Service. So speculatively, the local LEOs who were supposed to be in the area and make sure no one with a gun climbed up on the roof effed up. People have said that witnesses saw the guy with a gun on the roof, told police, but that they failed to respond and prevent the assassination attempt. So how does that happen? Well, there's typically limited lines communication between the Secret Service and the local LEOs working the middle tier. You usually have one or two local law enforcement officer liaisons who have direct communication with the Secret Service, which means communications on the ground between local law enforcement officers being told about the shooter are being routed through dispatch to local liaisons, then to Secret Service. Compounding the difficulty to rapidly respond is the fact that there's always some confusion and inefficiency when multiple different law enforcement officer agencies come together to work a detail. Most of these agencies aren't used to working with each other and aren't given much information beyond a few pre-event briefings. I actually saw what can go wrong in these scenarios firsthand when President Bush's Secret Service detail almost engaged a local police SWAT/counter-sniper team during the 2004 G8 summit. No one had properly communicated the local SWAT team's position, so all the Secret Service saw was heavily armed individuals with a line of sight on the president. The whole thing was seconds away from being a tragic accident. In the same vein, there was likely some delay and confusion with the initial reports of a person with a gun on the roof, as local cops and Secret Service agents would all be trying to confirm the shooter didn't belong to one of the security support teams. So in summary, when looking for blame in this massive security failure, if I was a betting man, I'd say the answer rests with whatever detail likely local law enforcement officers were assigned to the area near the outbuildings. I'll also add that I worked 5 presidential details as a local law enforcement officer attachment, even though I was in close proximity for each detail, and only 2 of them did I actually ever see the president or vice president. That was Bush while he was in the limo driving away, and Cheney. But that was because I was on inner protection, feet away from him. You're explicitly trained that your eyes are always on the crowd, surroundings, and potential threats, never on the president themselves, for obvious reasons. Now, my experience is entirely limited to official presidential visits rallies, which are planned at least months and in some cases a year in advance. It's likely that some of the breakdowns or issues I mentioned can be exponentially increased when it comes to campaign trips, as these stops come up or change on very short notice. And I have firsthand experience with that. I go to a lot of MAGA rallies and they are scheduled a lot of the times only 3 or 4 days in advance. So I can imagine a reality where they scheduled this rally maybe 5 days ago. Actually, I know for a fact they only scheduled this rally about a week ago, so maybe the local law enforcement officers didn't have time to fully vet the area. But remember, here's how Trump responded to Nancy Pelosi being targeted in an assassination attempt and her husband being beaten nearly to death with a hammer. Political violence has no place in a democratic society. We must always condemn it.
And we'll stand up to crazy Nancy Pelosi who ruined San Francisco. How's her husband doing, by the way? Anybody know?
This was Trump's response.
And she's against building a wall at our border, even though she has a wall around her house, which obviously didn't do a very good job.
Just totally terrible, vacuous talking points. That reminds me of this post right here. 2016, F your feelings. 2017, you lost, get over it. 2018, drinking your liberal tears. 19, 4 more years, bitches. 2020, stop the count. Water the tree of liberty. 2022, burn the groomer books. 2023, where's Nancy? Where's Nancy? 2024, wow, I'm horrified by political violence. I can't imagine how we ever got to this point. We used to be a unified country. Who could do this? Literally, Republicans are the biggest crybabies in the world, and if we want to be objective, yes, Donald Trump was the victim of a shooting today, but the way that Republicans are acting like their rhetoric wasn't ratcheting up the tension in America, hasn't been doing that for the past 8 to 10 years, then they are in a different reality. We also have elected officials calling for investigations. Representative Ruben Gallego said, "Dear Director Cheadle, I write regarding the assassination attempt of President and presumptive Republican Party nominee Donald Trump. As you are aware, it's the sworn duty of the Secret Service under the direction of the Secretary of Homeland Security to protect former presidents and major presidential candidates. Yesterday's incident, which led to the tragic death of an onlooker and several injuries, including to President Trump, raises grave concerns regarding security measures or lack thereof." He says, "As an American, a veteran, and a public servant to the greatest democracy in the history of the world, I demand answers to the following questions. Did the Trump campaign request additional protection or resources for this event? If so, were those resources denied and why? Did the Secret Service detail, separate from President Trump's campaign team, request additional resources? Who approved the security plan for this event? Was a proper threat assessment of nearby buildings even conducted? Did attendance of the event raise any alarms? If so, how were any concerns handled before the attempted assassination? Were there any failures in protocol that enabled the shooting? If not, how was President Trump, one of only 6 living current or former presidents and a current major presidential candidate, almost assassinated, and what needs to change? Will the Secret Service reconsider its denial of protection for presidential candidate RFK Jr.?" I don't know why Gallego put that last question in there, but some of those questions are absolutely valid. There have been reports that people called out the shooter and the cops failed to act, and I explained why that might have been the case earlier, but these are completely valid questions, and I think any responsible investigation would have these questions being answered, right? Either way, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a like, comment a blue heart, hit that subscribe button, and have a great day.